All right, it's the top of the hour. Welcome, everyone, to the second edition of MakerDAO's Regenerative Finance Constitutional Voter Committee meeting. I had a little exercise that I wanted to kick off with as people are coming into the room. But just for some housekeeping, there is a chat that you can open up while you're in the room, and there's a little box that should be floating that says Refi CVC meeting on your upper right. So you can open that up and you'll see at the top, I've just posted some links, which most of you on this call so far probably have already seen. Hey, Paper. Hey, Rune. So what we're doing is an exercise to get, some vibes going and some flow as people come into the space. I want you to post a GIF, a meme, an animation, and here's the prompt. It's the future. Financial Times reports, MakerDAO has ended poverty worldwide. This is a true story. It hits the news in the future. How do you feel? Right now in the chat, how do you feel the refi CVC is specifically mentioned as being a major reason that in the future, MakerDAO has ended poverty? Come on. We want to hear from you in the chat. If you're just coming in, thanks for joining in the meeting. We're dropping GIFs, we're dropping emojis even. If you're more of an emoji person, how? Well, Tim, exactly. We're going to get to that part. We're going to reverse engineer it. But right now we're just like feeling it in our body. Like you're trolling. I don't know if it's Twitter at this time or if it's the Doge app or what it is, but it's just come across the wire. Financial Times is reporting MakerDAO has ended poverty. How do you feel in this moment? Imagine what's happening to your body. Can you breathe right now? Because you all who are in this refi CVC meeting today, like in the future, they mentioned this meeting, like this moment in this article about MakerDAO ending poverty. They actually mentioned this meeting. So like, imagine how you're feeling about that. Okay. So for those joining, we're just spending a few minutes while everyone comes into the meeting. And make sure you open up the chat. There will be a little comment box in the upper right of the channel, and you should be able to drop that and see how everybody is feeling. You guys are just like, Kianga, that is too crazy. We don't have any feelings. We are dead inside right now. So, okay, that's fine. All right, well, let's go ahead and kick off. We've got a bunch of folks in the room. We'll kick off the new format. Again, welcome. I just wanted to say a few things about what we're going to try for this week's meeting. For those of you who were with us last week, it was a great first week. Our refi meeting was the first in a series of lots of different styles and approaches to this meeting, and that was really great to see. So we're going to try going forward the voice channel here in the main Maker Discord and see how that works. And if for those of you who've done community calls in other DAOs, it can be a really, really great platform to be very accessible, more convenient for mobile, maybe better for privacy for some folks. There's really lots of technology to do presentations and staging and what have you. So let's try this for a couple of weeks and see how we go. Some things that I've been writing in the forum, and just to introduce myself, I'm Kianga. I'm the moderator for the group, and I'm kind of a stand-in for the MakerDAO's tokenized community of refi and impact projects. That's the official member and at this point in time, the only member of the refi CVC. So as a moderator here, I'm kind of approaching my role as to how are we going to attract prospective MKR holders who are DAOs and other tokenized communities, other decentralized groups that are working in refi impact and public goods. So that's a little bit behind my thinking of, how I'm going to approach these calls as the moderator, and love to have all the feedback about how it's working relative to what makes sense for refi, what makes sense for Maker, and what makes sense in the context of this entire experiment of CVCs. So we'll just do 1 hour at most. We don't need to spend the whole time in this call. It is a business meeting. I just want to say that at the top, there's a bunch of kind of rules in business that we're wanting to get done over the quarter, and this meeting is a part of that. But before we jump into more businessy topics, I kind of wanted to spend the first 30 minutes or the first half of our time together talking about a very important purpose statement in the Maker Constitution, which is Maker's vision of an unbiased world currency. And I even had the exact wording in the notes, but an unbiased world currency that basically is DAI as a decentralized stablecoin. So I wanted to hear from everyone on this call, like, what does that, and whoever's here, whether you are an MKR holder, whether you're a constitutional delegate who's chosen to follow the strategy, aligned delegates, contributors at Maker, just everyone's welcome to contribute to this, because I think the main thing we want to do in these meetings is hone the vision for refi CVC, right? That the Constitution, that the delegates can interpret, and that we're the only ones in this community that are going to be able to set that and to specify that and to show our alignment. And so we definitely want to spend time talking about vision, and not the details of the vision of maybe the rules and the scopes, but where do we want to see ourselves in the future? And then the whole iterative process that we'll go through, depending on our roles in the ecosystem, will be about ultimately like boiling that down into language that gets implemented. But for the kickoff, I just wanted to start there, because our scope that's in focus for this week is decentralized collateral. So it seemed like maybe a good place to start is to have a conversation a little bit about what is DAI in this future, where MakerDAO has, say, for example, ended poverty. So the floor is open for anyone to come off mic or drop questions in the chat, or more emojis or comments. But I'd love to just, free flow, just come off mute and tell us what you think about DAI. What does an unbiased world currency mean? A decentralized currency, what should it be? What should it look like?
So pop in with like not picking winners and losers, right? Like that's something we would think of like a biased currency, one that is supporting certain regions or people rather than others. Let's not do that.
Ooh, can you say more? Like winners and losers, how? How does that relate to regions?
Yeah, so like perhaps with the lens of refi, it's like a bit more exciting, right? Because you're looking for things that contribute, things that help the common good. But I think like in particular to use the dollar as a comparison, right? Being able to accept dollars is often weaponized, right? If you don't like what the U.S. is doing, we might cut off your ability to trade. We might cut off your ability to freely interact or to have access to like the global economy. So that's pretty problematic. And when we think of like an unbiased global currency, one of the first things I would want to make sure it's doing is like that it's available for anyone who's looking to use money. and we can work on the refi stuff in terms of the backing. I think that makes a lot of sense because then your dollar is backing good things. But in terms of the end user, like it's really problematic, and I don't think you can be an unbiased world currency if you're trying to say, hey, these are the people that can use it. Like our user base needs to be anyone with an internet connection to be truly unbiased.
Fantastic. Don't be shy. That's exactly what we want to hear. Let's see. I'll read this out. We are recording this, so I will read out loud. The global from Matt, Frontier Research, one of the constitutional delegates following our strategy. Thank you. The global aspect seems vital, not solely focusing on, for instance, people or users in the US. That ties into the public good framing as well. Totally. So again, the prompt is like, what does an unbiased world currency look like? And where does decentralization come in? Where does the structure of DAI come in? Because we do want to end the meeting talking a little bit about the role of decentralized collateral, but still keeping it high level right now, because not everybody on the call or listening to the call may know anything about how DAI is composed or what it is. So what are just sort of high level when you think about such a thing? How would you describe it or define it? Another comment in the chat from Rune. To Peyton's point, I think the new focus on applying AI knowledge and technology rather than just donating funds directly will be a lot more unbiased, and that we can support the development of a single open source stack of AI resources for refi businesses, and it will be equally and freely available to all of them. Awesome. I know there's more. I know that more of you are talkative. Several people are typing. Okay, no pressure. PBG, another one of our delegates following this strategy. We're so grateful. I think generally speaking, DAI could be a great way for developing countries to transact in between nations and help pull people away from having to rely on, for example, Western Union with high fees. Remittances, yes, 100%. So these comments are really helpful because I think when we're speaking about vision and policy, the refi CVC position paper that's published at the end of the quarter, we really want it to be a community. We want it to reflect the community. I mean, ultimately, I guess the internal process that will happen here is that we'll draft something and have a snapshot vote of acre holders until there's more members in the CVC. But really, I think we'd still be looking for the input of having that policy perspective reflect a very wide or an inclusive demographic of people in refi who may not even know these types of meetings are happening, right? We want to attract people who are outside of Maker currently into this meeting, and I think we want the policy statement of refi CVC to reflect that. So appreciate everyone's comments. Bona Publica says, in a truly unbiased currency system, everyone who uses the currency would be on an equal playing field in terms of access, exchange rates, and transaction fees. Great. Maker Core from Rune can directly support the financing of refi, but without having to pick winners. That then just see, Rune, you're getting into some of the weeds on your comments. We're still at the high level vision, like just in general part. But without having to pick, I'm still going to read it, but without having to pick winners that then just receive subsidies in the form of free money, which would quickly cause corruption and drama. About Rune, you're cracking me up. Okay, I'm not going to finish reading that. We'll circle back. We'll circle back to that. Code night. Okay. Also, I'm just going to skip that comment for now as well. We're doing, and see, we don't do enough of this in Maker, so I'm creating space, which is like the vision, the big picture, not so much the Maker implementation, but I'll just give one last call on this particular question of, and for those who may have missed the beginning of the chat, it's the future. The Financial Times has just reported that MakerDAO has ended poverty. And so then the idea is, well, what does an unbiased world currency look like? Not the details of the Maker implementation per se, but just sort of that's the thought, the vision exercise. Oh no, okay, so we've got a good a point from Frontier just to say stop about what kind of comments aren't helpful for aligned delegates. And so for those who aren't as much in the weeds of these meetings, we've got some some rules we're dealing with in different participants who are very, very important in governance in Maker, which are our delegates. But I think it's all very relaxed right now, and we want to have a first quarter, the second quarter of the year, experimenting, trying, and feeling our way. So let's try to be very understanding. Okay. All right, there's some chat. Okay, so we've got some good comments. Thank you so much, Peyton, on that opening remark about picking winners and losers. And I think the other comments, and I may not have read, oh, here's something from QGov. Let me see what that's saying. I may not have read everything, but of course, thinking much more outside the US when we're talking about how this unbiased world currency operates and who it operates for. QGov says an interesting issue use case that we see is allowing the settling and payment of forward contract credits, such as carbon credits, to be settled in a decentralized manner. For example, the carbon credit is $1 trillion+ space that will certainly see a lot more adoption in the near future. Definitely. And I think, okay, let me take that as a segue to the next maybe prompt. And I really want to hear your lovely voices for any of you who want to come off mic, including the delegates who are here. Whether you follow the strategy or not follow the strategy, we're all one family. So the credit carbon settlement, decentralized DAI. So we can get maybe a little bit more technical, like operationally, what is it good for? I think that was another prompt in the description for this meeting. Like, what is it good for? And that's almost like has double meaning, right? Good, quote, the public good, but also practically speaking. So what are the qualities? And if there's thoughts that you have about decentralization, the collateralized nature of DAI, what that should look like, feel free to begin to insert those details now. But what is it good for? A decentralized, what does that even mean? A decentralized, unbiased world currency. And I think QGov, to your point, I think what's evolving around carbon credits is a particular, and for refi perspective, it's a huge part of the projects out there. Where does DAI fit in, or where does this decentralized, unbiased world currency fit in with these other technologies, these other new marketplaces that are popping up? Any thoughts? Anyone want to come off mic? I see Nadia's in the chat. Hi, Nadia. I'm not picking on you, but basically we're doing a high level. I'm not sure when you popped in. We're doing some visioning. We're doing like kind of a conversation that's more aspirational for when MakerDAO ends poverty. How did we get there? So more specifically, though, what does this decentralized DAI look like? Unstoppable money. How people choose to value it may change, but the technology itself will keep humming regardless of externalities. That's a really great way to talk about it. what it's good for. It's good for being unstoppable and adaptable, upgradable in a sense. Hugo says, I feel like settling these contracts with DAI, referring to the carbon markets, on-chain carbon markets, settling such contracts with DAI might eliminate the middleman and lower fees. Maybe not saying only DAI, but focusing like the RWA team or assets on this in the future might be something interesting to take a look at. Absolutely. We've got some other folks typing. If you're feeling any emotions right now, as you're just like getting in the headspace of like, wow, we actually ended poverty and it started right here today and you guys were in the meeting. How does that make you feel? Give me an emoji, give me a GIF. I might be super terrible at this moderator thing and very corny, but I'm just gonna let it all hang out and you guys can like it or lump it. I'm gonna make these meetings fun, damn it. How are we doing on time?
Love it, Kanya. Oh, thank you for. I would say I sometimes feel like dumb on these questions, like because it's really easy to parrot, like like oh, it's immune to capture, and all these other things. But like, what it actually means is pretty powerful, and I hope everyone's like getting jazzed up about that because yeah, the future where we've stopped poverty and we did it with an unbiased currency is like wow, we just leveled up civilization quite a bit, and I think we have the building blocks to get there.
It's pretty absurd. But people say what we're doing here right now is kind of crazy. So I just think it matches, right? I think it fits. Like you have to be a little bit mad to be on this call right now. So why not just go all the way with it? Say, all right, if we're already insane, then let's believe that we ended poverty. It's not okay, you're confused by the analogy. It's just for fun. It's just to have like a specific example. Whether eliminating poverty with DAI. Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's just like a thought exercise. Like maybe that's totally nonsensical. I'm trying to kind of provoke you in any which way I can that maybe is going to help create, I don't know, a vibe for these meetings or a personality for the refi CVC or, I don't know, something like that. Okay, Code Knight says, big picture DAI provides a way to create a level playing field so the rich and powerful can't shift monetary policy in their favor, thus providing more opportunities to get out of poverty. Poverty. All right, I'm going to find a GIF for that. I'm going to give a GIF for that. How many people say GIF versus GIF? It's GIF. So, all right, let's move on then to a little more brass tacks of what we're implementing at MakerDAO. Last week, we talked about liquidity and stability scope, which just basically means, the rules. It's just the rules for DAI. Yeah, paper, but JIF. So you're agreeing with me that it's GIF and not GIF? I think J meaning GIF. Yeah, you're right on. Yep, right on. See, essentially. Okay, so now let's get into the stability and liquidity scope, which we talked a little bit. Well, last week we talked about a lot of stuff, but we get to continue the conversation because we're really going to see the specifications around the stabilization and liquidity of the whole protocol and ecosystem merge to be in conversation with rules around decentralized collateral and real world assets. Like all those concepts that are now sort of three separate scopes and three separate rule sets are going to come into one. But so today we want to talk about a little bit more decentralized collateral. But again, like kind of as high level as we can to what the vision is and where we're going, because I think offline of these calls, and certainly with the help of our amazing delegates, is where we can get inputs on what some of the details might need to be for our position papers. So at the top of the chat, I linked our Google Doc where anyone can go in and put in words. So we'll save some of that sausage making for the Google Doc, but love to have comments and anyone who wants to come off mic to talk about your views. And I think there was also a great post by Steakhouse Financial for those who maybe have read that and have some thoughts. The decentralized nature of DAI and the collateral. I think someone, Noteland, I think we need you to mute your, or maybe Retro, if you're able to mute that person. Not Lad has a hot mic. Okay, that works too. So yeah, so for the rest of our time, yes.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, great.
Maybe
Good.
one idea could be, so I'm just thinking one of our jobs as delegates is to translate CVC's view into policy or provide ideas for how to do that. So maybe it would be helpful if you could share, what do you think about decentralized collateral? How does that fit into the refi vision, do you think?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can give you some thoughts. That's why I thought this was just such a great fit for MakerDAOs and why I've been saying refi, people should really look at Maker and DAI. The permissionlessness, that's just huge. For the reasons that have been said at the beginning of the call, so that the friction that comes with the KYC world that we have, and it's not just about KYC and documentation that's keeping so much of the world kind of out of the financial system per se. It's also just like the friction and the cost and the rents and the benefit, the maximum benefit I feel of what's been invented is sort of the obliteration of all those things. So when I think of a regenerated world, a regenerated economy, is regenerative finance, in the sense that, what did Payton say? Winners and losers aren't determined by where you're born, whether that's geography or socioeconomically within the same place or under any particular defining characteristic. So the decentralization, the permissionlessness, the accessibility, the stability and safety, of course, from a technical perspective, I think it's absolutely core for us to have real regeneration. I don't think I don't know of any project on the planet right now that can do what Maker has a chance to do, and achieve what's very difficult to achieve, but to really, really see the innovation and the new models and the liquidity flows that can, maybe be organized and generated locally. And of course, the refi space has tons of ideas about that. Those are the types of things that I think are important, or I think will be important for this community around decentralization. And so I think, to the extent DAI is, it's structured as this collateralized digital object. What should that look like to give the most? I mean, there's two ways of thinking about it, right? Like, there's tactically, because there's a lot of headwinds. Just leave it there. So there's tactics. It's not like a straight line, maybe, to get there. What are going to be the trade-offs? In what order? how would we as refi want to measure success? You know, are we trying to bring in X% of the world to have access to something? I mean, but then, so I think we need to I'd like to see, I think this group should frame it out along as many dimensions as we can. Peyton dropped in the chat that Monet posted something on efficiency frontier of liquidity and adjusted revenue. That's great. So any thoughts about some more of the specifics of how DAI is designed and the role that decentralized collateral plays in that? And I know that also from a very practical standpoint, figuring out the right balance of availability and of collateral that's liquid versus the demand for that liquid collateral based on a whole bunch of complicated ways that the system operates, but really refining the matching between, what's called the assets and liabilities of the whole system is something that's a priority to get right. And part of what I know the community is trying to nail down is, how to document that, how to get the right advice and expertise around that. But maybe for the meeting, before we get into maybe some of those nuances, because again, we have the Google Doc, so feel free to drop language in the Google Doc for those who are really, really getting into the technicalities as to how CVCs ought to approach this. But what are thoughts from people on the call about decentralized collateral and its composition in the framework for DAI? Maybe maybe I can try another prompt. For a user perspective, from the perspective of growth and adoption, what role do you think the decentralized collateral backing of DAI, what role do you think it has in making DAI attractive to whoever may be a potential user? I mean, does it matter? Like, maybe we should just do all treasury ETFs or all real assets, real world assets. Why wouldn't we do that? Or should we? There's also been this discussion of, the vaults, the current system of MakerDAO has a permissionless ability for people to pledge collateral or transfer Ethereum, for example, or wrapped Bitcoin, and then borrow DAI into existence. But as interest rates in the real world have gone up, you can maybe have a better return on your capital, risk-adjusted return, all things considered, if you're able, again, the accessibility issue, but if you're able to put your capital in US Treasuries, why would you muck around with DeFi? So the system is not getting paid or generating a lot of revenue right now from decentralized collateral. There's been people who have said that, the system itself can't scale with the reliance on decentralized collateral. There's just not enough demand to borrow against decentralized collateral. So what do we do about it? All right, let me read something in the chat from Rune. In my view, we have overestimated the significance. And in practice, the target users often don't have such a deep and intricate understanding and generally prefer things they are familiar with, such as Tether. The importance of decentralized collateral is its actual risk mitigating properties, but unlikely to help much with adoption, I think. And then frontier researchers saying that, it partly depends on the growth of decentralized assets more generally. So as stewards of the Maker ecosystem and protocol, as a collective that's holding MKR, because I'm speaking in the voice of, say, MakerDAOs or refi CVC member, we're here because we believe this ecosystem and this currency is important. It's going to be valuable. It's going to be helpful to things we care about. What should we think now about we know it depends. Do we think that can DAI be decentralized? Can DAI function as an unbiased, permissionless, maybe it's like permissionless credit? I mean, can DAI do all these things for the world that we talked about at the beginning if it doesn't have decentralized collateral, or if that's not like kind of a big deal? Rune saying I believe we should focus on efficiency so we can accumulate staked ETH to own and bulk up for future, where there might be real risk to real world assets, rather than rent it at subsidized rates today, when there are still many safe ways to do RWA in the short term. And Frontier Research adds, potentially that demand for decentralized and resilient qualities will grow in the medium to long-term future, but otherwise I agree with Rune that demand is limited right now pragmatically. And Bona Publica is saying the current amount of decentralized collateral is insufficient to enable the scaling of DAI to trillions. So this is very helpful. We're talking about sequencing, priorities or tactics, vision versus, the cards we're being dealt right now. How to position ourselves for today, prepare for the future. I think that's very helpful from a policy standpoint, and I think to help us articulate enough detail to guide the delegates in their voting. Code Night adds, decentralized collateral provide resilience, but likely doesn't increase supply. It does provide a hedge against real-world asset interest dropping for Maker revenue. Can anyone speak about the liquidation process, or give us a little tutorial about some of the sensitivities on needing to liquidate collateral if someone doesn't repay, our surplus buffer, and this tension between, why it's maybe good, the on-chain assets are good because they're in our control. I mean, there are other things about the decentralized collateral, right? There's the ability to physically control them because they're on-chain. Anyone want to comment about some of those on the microphone?
Fuel for thought. Like, what's pretty unique about decentralized collateral compared to centralized collateral is how quickly you can liquidate it, right? So like we mentioned, like in the case where their collateralization ratio falls, right? But basically they haven't given enough collateral for the debt they have. That's a situation where you want to act quickly. But as we talk about like liquidity management for DAI and all this other stuff, I think that's like the real superpower of having a good backing in decentralized assets is, for sure you can dump them onto the market in exchange for another ERC20 like DAI. In a moment's sense. Whereas if you're having to rely on legal structures, right, then how long your liquidation process takes is entirely up to the state of law, how long the courts, or how fastly you can expect someone to adhere to their legal agreement. So yeah, think about timing in terms of like liquidations and decentralized collateral, meaning not only is it entirely on chain, but it's entirely on chain and not tethered to some real world entity that could also be attacked.
Totally. You just also reminded me of something I was thinking about during the DPEG weekend, when SVB's closure triggered that. And that's a little bit about DAI's current peg to the dollar and the value of DAI as a unbiased world currency, decentralized. So one of the things that I was thinking about when that was happening is, even though the dollar value of DAI was like going down, I felt that DAI could still be a better choice because of its utility, because of its network effects, because of its, all of these decentralized qualities, means that it could perhaps recover pegged to a different asset, right? Or pegged to some other, or a basket or something like that, as an established project with a lot of provenance, it as a secure digital asset that you can hold and potentially control, even if there's a period of some really crazy DPEG or whatever else can blow up. If you believe in the governance of the organization, if you believe in, kind of what's behind the whole system, it strikes me that decentralized collateral, and at least having the infrastructure that's sustained and maintained around it, gives you a lot more options to recover value, however that is measured from an exchange perspective. And so that's, again, tied into, from a refi perspective, why is this unbiased? What does that mean? Decentralization, what does that mean? Why is that so important? The other scenario is when, or if there's either planned desire to change the reference asset, or circumstances force that, how does the system recover value for its users? Okay. Boop Bop R2D2 1977 says, DeFi Kala also provides a hedge to the potential ending of the US of A. Let's not forget, reiterate brand, soft peg to the DAI. Right. It is a soft peg. This is not an algorithmic stable coin. So there's lots of algorithms running around Maker, and we've got some great vision and some commentary about how artificial intelligence modules can be used throughout the system. But the current structure is collectively kind of on a net basis over collateralized. Well, as we come toward 45 minutes in, and continue to please add comments in the chat. I guess the last prompt I would give to this group is, what would be some feedback from your perspective on CVCs and these types of meetings, and then the operation of CVCs in general. What I hope to try to effort out and figure out is, how does this 1 hour do a whole bunch of things? And I don't know if this 1 hour can do all these things, but we want to, particularly, I don't say particularly in refi, I mean, I think everyone wants to see more more excitement, more energy, more bodies, more everything coming into MakerDAO. So we certainly see that as part of how we want to organize these calls, and our communications is to attract talented and enthusiastic people from all over the world. We also need this weekly hour to be a focal point for our constitutional duties and our live synchronous opportunities to be with the delegates who will vote according to our policies. So any just feedback from the room on that dynamic, and particularly with our focus as a CVC on the public good purpose of of Maker that's been stated in the Constitution, a public good fund, whether that's going to be, however that's going to evolve in terms of helping the world and also the public goods specifically around, providing kind of like infrastructure that is open and available. There's so many areas that refi as a title, regenerative finance, touches. So just any feedback from the room about the way to organize these kinds of calls, CVC communications in general, that gets all of the things done, right? Gives the governance the direction that it needs to function well, is a place that's accessible and enjoyable for people coming from all different perspectives or knowledge. And also recognizing that as a model, as an example, we know that for this to scale, for governance to be handled by policy set by CVC meetings to scale, we don't want to expect or demand that MKR holders represented in the CVC are going to want to talk about or know about, lots of sausage. But then at the same time, if they're expected to sort of give policy, you need to know what sausage is, right? So it's like, where's that line? Payton says, I think it's eventually going to go like a scholastic model, for lack of a better term. There's pre-reading and research, i.e. homework, that will make your hour of participation much more fruitful, but there will be ways to engage and share knowledge even if participants haven't had time to do the prep. Each meeting can begin with going over what the homework was and ending with assigning work before next week. Okay, I like that. Frontier Research says, agree, it might also be more like a policy debate within the CVC on particular votes in any given week with affiliated, aligned delegates feeding in with support and listening. Debate sounds more fun for someone like me. Yep. And I think, I also say, this is Kianga, who many of you have known for a while, saying, this quarter is also, and also with things that are going to be announced over the quarter and some of the transition stuff gets out of the way, right? Like, I envision this might also be a meeting where we learn about refi projects. Like, we also learn a little bit about things that are happening outside of even a DeFi context to help germinate, like, well, what kind of policies does it make sense to develop to help those projects succeed, right? Where do the two come together? Because, lots of folks in refi, they're into the the fi part's not that well worked out. And right now the DeFi part's in the doghouse as well. But hopefully maybe this time also is an opportunity for us in the Maker community or in DeFi to learn something about what we can do that maybe we never even thought of as well, by seeing a little bit more tactically what's being built even on other L1s, or you name it. Any closing comments, thoughts? Such a good turnout. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, so we'll just wind it down. Maybe in the coming weeks we can have some beats. Okay, we've got one more comment. Yeah, we've got time. We'll go till the top of the hour. Bona Public has said, could you please spend 5 to 10 minutes reviewing the current governance polls or executives? Oh, Peyton, that's amazing. See, this is why the MIP says that CVCs can rely on ecosystem scope, and so I just am totally leaning into that. So yes, okay, so Bona Publica. So there is obviously currently a poll up now that adopts first full set of amendments to a bunch of the MIPs and scopes, and 12 days remaining, plenty of time. Yep, and even so next week, we're still going to be within this theme of asset liability management and the composition of the collateral that backs DAI, and what ReFi should be thinking about, or will be, looking to refine its thinking around, even as we want to support the need to get the advisory councils more engaged, up and running, the process around that. We want to have something that's really brilliant by the time the end game is live. We're in the pre-game, so lots of iteration. So maybe I'd put that on you, Bona Publica, like you're going to be voting on that. I guess as a CVC member, I got to tell you, wouldn't necessarily really know what the changes are and what they mean relative to our policy. I guess I would say, as long as you're not blowing up the public good purpose in any of those changes, ReFi is probably fine, because right now, the continuity and the stability of the entire ecosystem would be our priority, right? So we know it's very sensitive. Teams are transitioning out, resources are being moved around. I think we would defer to any of these amendments that are coming up for a vote now from the people who've been most involved in crafting the new endgame and who are in the trenches implementing things. We wouldn't really want to, in like these immediate weeks, put any roadblocks there that would disrupt things from that kind of holistic standpoint. But papers making, both Peyton and Paper made good points. It's a big package, top level changes. Read all the changes. So I mean, that's really, I would say, for the delegates, right? And so just giving you my best sense. Again, I don't represent MakerDAOs technically, in the sense of like Kianga giving you the opinion of an MKR holder. I'm kind of interpreting all these meta interpretations, but we're really trying to build out a community that others are going to want to come into and really run with, both in his role as a moderator, in terms of what's written in the policy statement. That's not going to come from me, Kianga. That's not even going to come from any MakerDAO's members that want to get active, but we wanted to really be dynamic and attract a group. So for now, I think what that means from a ReFi CVC perspective is, the people who are really in the weeds, continuing to trust their stewardship, and as long as something is not rising to the level of blowing everything up, then any delegates, and this is something also I should just mention, and it's in our, we have also another Google Doc, it's linked in the meeting notes for today, giving an initial draft of our overall policy statement, in which we've been very clear that we are not going to ban delegates over this quarter or until further notice, unless there's something that's like boldly unconstitutional, because it's impossible for you to really understand how to vote in alignment with our views when we haven't published our views in any detail. So any delegates following refi CVC just don't really need to worry about that at all. As long as in your communication, just give us your interpretation of how the vote that you do aligns with the public good purpose of MakerDAO. Like, you can feel free to define that however you want, and I think that's going to be fine. So I hope that answers the question in a satisfactory way. I'm just reading some of the chat going to public. Okay, great. So this is going to be interesting, push and pull, and I think different CVCs are going to be very different. A CVC that is a particular MKR. I mean, we have CVCs where someone has put their MKR that they hold to create a CVC, and that's probably going to be a very different dynamic than what we have going on here in refi. We've got, I think growth is really exciting because you've got a team that were both previous recognized delegates and have also been with the project for a long time and have worked in the core unit in growth. So, they may have also a different approach toward like setting their policy, and because their growth versus something like, hey, regenerative finance, whatever that means. So I think all the CVCs are going to be really different, but that's sort of how I think we're approaching that question for refi for now. All right, any emojis? Okay, let's close it down. This historic meeting where they first talked about ending poverty. Yay. You guys giving me no help whatsoever. Okay, some rockets. Be careful with those rockets. This is not financial advice. We're going to the actual moon and Mars. We're not promising anybody returns on anything. Okay. We're all done here. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to tag. I mean, you can tag me anytime, anywhere, but also if there's conversations in the forum, tag Good News, the MakerDAO's ambassador. There's things that you want to see get kind of reflected in the published our sort of like quarterly policy statement or scope views. That would be huge help for everyone on this call. The eyes on the forum. So that actually is like a takeaway for everybody. And particularly I would say the delegates following refi CVC. Just like tag Good News as like a CC FYI, and that way we'll have a good list of the conversations going on that maybe pertain that we don't want to miss for our policy discussions. Okay. All right, good night, G, good morning. What time is it, Matt? Okay, maybe he just, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. See you same bat time, same bat channel right here next week.